Welcome to Soltron. This is the video review for Legacy Skyquake. And here's a size comparison, and you can see he's quite a bit smaller than the old school leader class figures, which is kind of becoming like the commander class at this point. This guy does have a really cool aesthetic. They did a really weird thing where they made him like a crossover between the G2 Skyquake and the Prime Skyquake, and I think they pulled it off really well. And the thing that bothered me about the original Prime Skyquake was that he had rubber parts, like the head was rubber and the fins would be rubber. So I like that this guy's just all plastic. That's something I always wanted from that original Prime figure. I always wanted like an upscale figure that replaced all the rubber parts with plastic. So this guy really fits the bill because he's a little bit bigger. So he's got a very Prime-esque head. It's supposed to have light piping, but yeah, it's really hard to get the angle just right where you can actually see his eyes. Usually they're just kind of black. Yeah, it looks like the light has to be directly above him. So that's kind of unfortunate. But yeah, he's got a great aesthetic. Very blocky, interesting looking. And his weapons are pretty cool. Like, I really like this Gatling gun. It's a little bit small for him. And the sword is also a little bit small as well. And I'm really worried about, like, if this guy ever falls on the floor, like, this sword will be just smashed to pieces. This doesn't look like it's going to survive at all. But it looks very cool, and it folds in half. And that's so it can slot into the Gatling gun here, which doesn't really do anything, but it's a good storage option. And then he's got enough wrist articulation that you can get him to kind of two-hand the Gatling gun. But like I said, the Gatling gun's a little bit small for him, so it looks better with one hand, I think. It just doesn't look like it's something he even needs to two-hand because he's so large in comparison. There we go. So there he is with his Gatling gun. So that looks pretty cool. But again, this gun just needed to be a little bit bigger. It's just too small for him. And then you could just go ahead and take that off. And it's got this ball joint peg here. So most figures I think will be able to handle it, but it really helps to have articulated wrists. And this guy has so much shoulder articulation that he can, and like double jointed elbows. So that really helps with articulating that. He's also got kind of a, I don't know what you describe this. Yeah, this is a ball joint neck. It doesn't have side to side, but it does go all the way around, and it does have really excellent upward motion if he needs to have like a flight pose. So that's really cool. They worked that in. And then he does have bicep swivels. These are pretty tight, and these end up like activating his kind of like butterfly joints, which are also a nice inclusion. And then he's got double jointed elbows to give him a little bit more than 90. So that's really cool. And then wrist swivel. And then I find this shoulder's pretty tight. It's got like a squeaky ratchet. And this one's kind of just right. It's not too tight, not too soft. Also pretty squeaky. And he's got waist swivel, full outward kick on a nice clicking ratchet, and then a soft ratchet for the forward kick, backward kick. So it's nice those are on ratchets. And he's got thigh rotation pretty tight. And then double jointed knee, very nice looking. And then ankle rocker. So just loaded with articulation. Because his feet are so tiny though, his ankles don't usually activate correctly. And they're a little bit flimsy. So it's hard to get them to actually be flush on the floor, but it can work. It's just kind of like the way his foot is shaped. It just doesn't have a lot of surface area. And he can be a little bit back heavy because you can see these heels don't really offset his backpack too much. They don't stick out. But mostly he'll do all the standard posing. So yeah, really great figure. I think the quality though is something I question. There's some places here and there where he's got like some little stress marks, and that's just like out of package. I didn't really do anything to him to stress him out. Actually, I did. These tail fins, I did. There's like a little, I'll show it more when I transform it, but there's like a little notch that prevents you from folding these a certain way, and I tried to get it past that notch, so I might have stressed the plastic a little bit. But there's just places here and there that show some plastic stress, and that worries me a little bit about whether this figure is going to survive in the long term. But it's probably just because of the color of the plastic. He's probably solid otherwise. But I would rate this guy a little bit lower than regular Transformer quality. I feel like this guy's actually more of a 7, and that a big part of that is because he was misassembled. Because there's like a manufacturing fault with the way this guy's assembled that doesn't let his chest like transform cleanly, and I had to modify him so that it would be fixed and he would look correct. So I made a video about that already. You can check that out. But to transform this guy, you're going to just unpeg this backpack here, and then kind of fold these out. Try to get these out of the way the best you can. And then you have to extend his torso. And then one thing about the fix, the way I fixed it, so now you can just press this and that'll cause his torso to pretty much lock in place. You don't usually have to hold it here. So having that fixed is pretty nice. It helps with the fiddliness of his transformation. Anyway, you're going to rotate his wings around, and then kind of at the same time you're going to rotate these sections up and around. And this is kind of not on this one, the other side. You can see there's like a stress mark right there from where I folded it past this little notch here, just to try to get a different look in jet mode. But anyway, you're going to fold that and then just kind of connect that. And then one thing, now that I've modded this figure so that his chest fits correctly, one cool thing he can do is actually look more like his Prime version. So if we get his arms back in place, and then you can kind of just rotate these around. It depends on how brave you feel. You could actually slide out these mushroom pegs, and you can get him looking more like his original Prime version. I'm kind of worried about the plastic on this guy, so I'm not going to do that, but it depends on how brave you feel. But anyway, now that his chest has been modded, he can actually pretty much look like that original Prime figure. So you get his cockpit for his chest. So there's that look. Not too bad, actually. He's got some big gaps here, and I wonder if they are going to remold this figure. Maybe for Dreadwing, he's going to have more of his original transformation and look like this. But you can see it actually looks pretty good, and if you just swapped out these arms, it would be pretty convincing. I actually like the way this looks a lot. If you fold his wings back around, you get kind of like this armored look. I have a feeling they're going to remold this guy into Thunderwing, because it just seems like a natural use of this mold. Anyway, back to transformation. So he's going to open these arm panels that are in his forearms, and you're going to just fold in the fists. And then these arm panels are going to straighten out for transformation. And then you can take this whole cockpit assembly. You kind of fold these armored sections around the nose cone, and then you flip up the nose cone. Oh yeah, and that's another place I have a little stressed plastic right here is on this tab. So it's all these little stressed plastics that really have me worried about what's going to break off on this guy, but so far no issues. And then you tilt his head up a little bit to get the clearance you need. And then you're just going to fold that nose cone section right there, leave these out of the way. And then you do the same thing to the other arm. And you're just going to fold the butterfly shoulder joints up and then use the double joint to get them up as far as possible and make sure they're rotated the right direction. So they're going to look like this, and then the two halves are just going to fit in there. And then you can see there's another little stressed plastic on this tab as well, which pegs into the other forearm. And there's the underside pretty much all taken care of. So now you're just going to get his legs into position, which requires flipping them all the way up here. And then you got to rotate them at the thigh. And then I forgot to take out this filler piece in the back of his calf. That's going to become his tail fin now. And that just pegs in nicely right there. So I like that these peg in both positions. They don't just flop around. And then you're just going to fold that nicely there. And then this wing tab is going to peg in right there. And that's pretty much him all transformed. Flip them over, and then we're going to go ahead and finish tabbing these together, and then make sure these tail fins are up, but not too far, because there's a little nub there that prevents them from going up further than that. And then I think this is a pretty cool looking jet if you just ignore the armor. It's very sleek looking, well, sort of sleek looking, but then it's got these armored sections, which I think actually looks good altogether. So you get this very unique looking jet, and he's a good size. So here he is with Starscream, and you see they're actually almost the same size, which is kind of crazy. Because in robot mode, this guy is definitely a lot bigger. He definitely looks like 50% bigger. And then in vehicle mode, they actually look pretty much the same. If anything, this guy looks like he's a smaller scale. That's kind of bizarre because the cockpit is so much smaller. Yeah, that's really weird how he compacts down so well. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it would be nicer if he was more intimidating. But yeah, great looking figure. I do like this jet mode, not as much as like the Starscream mode, but still a cool looking jet. I think the alt mode's kind of like like an 8. Still a good looking alt mode. The robot mode's definitely a 10. Just very stylish, cool looking robot. And then I like to put the Gatling gun. I like to use this little handle piece and just kind of get it up here. This is kind of a good area for it. But there's like no other good places to put it. Like these holes, none of them really work with the handle very well. And this is like the most aerodynamic view you can get for it. But yeah, good figure overall. The $50 price point is a little bit questionable, but I'm glad I got him. I think I'm going to end up keeping this one. So I'll see you in the next one.